next to that, there was still an end table with a telephone and a lamp and the presence of some newspapers. It is hard to fathom how there could be so little damage in a room where a fire had been so intense that it consumed Mrs. Oski almost completely. The human body is incredibly difficult to incinerate. Crematoria placed the body in a chamber called a retort and subjected to heat the equivalent of a blast furnace. What comes out of the retort after several hours of exposure to temperatures as high as 22 to 2600 degrees Fahrenheit is not merely dust but bone fragments which are then mechanically pulverized to the proverbial dust and ash. Her bones did disintegrate and the body disintegrated. I think she was about 170 some pounds and we carried out about 65 pounds of what was left of her. Where does the intense heat come from? How does a fire consume a body and not consume the whole building, or even ignite combustibles inches away? Fire investigator Pat Kennedy believes spontaneous human combustion is a myth. He begins to unravel the Oski fire by looking at the possible source of its fuel. Well, the human body is not particularly combustible, but the fat, the animal fat, is combustible. In fact, it melts, turns to a from the leg of a child's cotton blend sweatsuit. The heat from the burning cloth melts the fat, which oozes through the open weave. The fat is the more abundant fuel source, and the fire leaves the cloth liquid and burns as what we call an ignitable liquid. Dr. Steve Novella of the Connecticut Skeptical Society reasons that can fuel the complete combustion of bones. If Beatrice Oski became a human candle, why was the fire so localized? Why were the end table and ottoman the only things in her home to be damaged by fire? A burning object must give off a certain amount of radiant energy to be capable of igniting an adjacent object. They had gone through those efforts to reduce thermal loss and to reduce air exchanges. A fire is similar to a human being in that it needs 15 to 16% oxygen to survive. Skeptics have theorized that Mrs. Oski's body fat burned like a candle, and that
Now we had the plan, but get yours. Then you know, that will yourself, but yeah, we're not yourself with the piano was.
Versi ook besef komen voor dan middag. En eerst een shit sudden and service er get help.
No, well, with the yourself, bro, with when that's younger and this is the video with for a little after and I was just gonna say some love to her, my family, I need to see they'll see her. Yeah, that was more of the night out and you're up to my color. All about the shank, yes, you know, loose, so what's off the heart. Wonder with the fresh nourished and the stomach lumps to it. Last thing is, you know, read off and the real minute then it is the hour random.
Get a certificate fabric of cinnamon set. Go knocks as soon as the end of the turn open the red. Sa in de bach, kom om die, is er alfa zoe.
Ja, zo maar dit lampje. Girl, it did
what? De alfa blokje. Sorry, it's the bach, dat is de game plan, ik probeer het. Snacks me was zo het zeggen. Oh, dit is niet in de vetsen, zo heb ik er van ergens. En with the wall of Dawson. First notes will be a notes against the oxygen.
Well, you know, man. Ja, zo was girl. Ja, there's so fine girl with the rest of the hip. As you were off. Dog your mouth, you know.
Of surfen als een neusbracht en stouw zo in de vetser uit nergens heel nacht.
It's not smelt much fun to watch this get now go in. You need to find out. Oh, then I snared out here. Then, I snared it. Yeah, this shit.
Snur nog niet aan die lijn of uitroep ze zwaar uitzien. Hij is de alpes en je was nog niet bij uitroep pap. Halve halve verzorgd, jongen, het scary outfit. Nee, ik don't know, daar viel op zich sauces en het is alweer biscuit mix. Ja, wist dus niet geschaad en zo niet 15, dit en niet. Nee, nu moet je ook spelen met scary outfit. Sure is het juist niet zo onder. Super was super. Zo, hoe snel weg hier dan. Zo, ik zag. En ik. Ja, fatsoen het schiet. Wat? Dit heb ik heel snel. I was niet bij hem zei ik zei. De shit in it. Is eerst de net niet aangevallen heeft. Is er net niet meer voor aan de brust. Ze valt iets aan. Is bang op. Ja, fältje mij. Die ben morgen is niet veel mooi. Nummer aan al best neder wel. Stel wat was er af zo wel. Wat mij nummer je met die dit saus heeft even.
Ik ga nog niet holy fuck. sitting there, so I've been looking where I'm up there at that, and I'm probably, ja, dat is nog wel de wie.
En hij not heel wist wat, vaak, dat we very often, zo sweet, not waarom het zit haven. Zoals is het, dat is u. Ja, zo solche teksten eigenlijk, maar van wie zit had. Heel bedankt en ook op de snor, met de woestner, slime, de schijf, nou, zou ik zeggen. Meneer, schijf, dat zou ik je aanzien, dat noem ik op. Die wonderful either Suzuki, schijf, het slime, vaag, naar de vliegen. Was is niet bezamen aan in de wereld. Hier wordt müssen kan, hier ook müssen wir afzetten. Maar vannacht is net niet zero. Dat was wel zo op. Dus nog, ja, ik wist dat er eerst was nog machine best binnen geraden zuurtje. Hier binnen zit hier avond en hier binnen zit het nog. Zat voorliefde bijvoorbeeld speciale volghieltje en net dus de bochtje met de rest nog op. Surface house of over is discussion. The house at 527 Argyle Road in the Drexel Hill area doesn't stand out from the rest. But on November 8th, 1964, it was the scene of something quite horrifying. In a second-floor sitting room, Mrs. Helen Conway, a 51-year-old widow, burned so quickly that more than 30 years after her death, fire officials are still puzzled. Retired Fire Chief Paul Haggerty was fire marshal of Upper Darby at the time.
She was babysitting 2 grandchildren. And her daughter and son-in-law went out for the evening. They were going to pick the children up sometime Sunday.
Conway's granddaughter Stephanie was watching cartoons on the first floor. Mrs. Conway, an invalid, used a bell to call for help. She asked Stephanie to bring her up a book of matches. The child brought them and went back down to watch TV around 8:30 a.m. Mrs. Conway's next-door neighbor was going to church and saw a glow at the window. She ran over to the house and Stephanie answered the door. Because the heat was so intense, the neighbor could not make it to the top of the stairs, and she called the fire department.
So approximately 8:50, 8:55, somewhere around there, the fire company responded. So that doesn't give you much of a window. So it had to be very fast. When the firemen got there, the fire was out. The heat was there, the doorknob was red hot, the door itself was hot. And when they opened the door, the smoke that hit them was hot.
Here was a fire scene even more macabre than the Oski case. There in the corner,
Right down to the bone so that a bracelet could be seen dangling from her wrist bones. I think she's on her toes a little bit. The way that the position of her legs, I know they were blistered, there were blisters on them, but they weren't burned.
Paul Haggerty's corner were the remains of Mrs. Conway, as seen in this photograph taken in her sitting room.
When they arrived, I mean, fluid didn't come out, but they were wet.